He kōna e purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
No mai whakaronga mai ki te aotai whenua. Welcome to Country Life. I'm Janina Schwanneker.
G'day, great to have your company. I'm Duncan Smith. Today, Sally meets a fan of the ancient skill of scything, who's hoping more New Zealanders will get into the swing of it.
I learn about how a team of Aussie scientists are making climate-friendly beer that can also help reduce livestock emissions.
Later on, Cosmo's at a Trans-Tasman Symposium that showcases regenerative dairy farming as a path to healthier soils and thriving ecosystems.
But first, to a wrap of what's been making headlines on the Rural News Desk this week. And starting with horticulture, there was news this week affecting the country's kiwifruit marketing firm Zespri. It's expecting to cut 65 roles and to leave 70 vacant roles unfilled. It's the world's largest marketer of kiwifruit, selling to more than 50 countries and managing 30% of the global volume. The changes will also affect some of the services Zespri currently provides the kiwifruit industry, and its views will be sought about these changes. And the who's who of New Zealand's fruit and vegetable sector gathered this week to try and harness horticulture's future and chomp into its challenges. Horticulture New Zealand's Chief Executive, Kate Scott, commended the industry for surviving everything that's been thrown at them.
If there's one word that sums up the past year in New Zealand horticulture, it's resilience. Resilience in the way growers have recovered from adverse events, resilience in the face of rising costs, regulatory reform, biosecurity threats, and the ongoing and unpredictable issues that arise every day when we're growing food for New Zealand and the world.
The Department of Conservation is soon to ask for expressions of interest from those wanting to take on the lease of Molesworth Station. The state-owned property in Marlborough's backcountry is known as New Zealand's largest farm, and its lease with Pāmu comes up next June. DOC spokesperson Stacey Wren says aside from farming, the opportunity could include other activities like guiding and accommodation.
It's got a really rich history of farming. It's also an area of natural ecological significance. It's home to a really wide range of threatened plants and animals, many of which aren't found anywhere else. Alongside that, it's also really popular from a recreational perspective for trampers, bikers, paddlers, hunters, fishers, etc. And so we really want to ensure that those recreational values are maintained.
And just on Pāmu, which has been running cattle on the station, high commodity prices and improved productivity have helped it turn around its overall profit. It's reported a net profit after tax of $120 million for the year ended June, compared to last year's loss of $26 million.
Tweaks to resource management legislation will see fewer farms requiring freshwater farm plans. The Resource Management Amendment Act recently came into law ahead of the wider RMA overhaul. Farms now need freshwater plans only if they're 50 hectares or larger, up from 20 hectares, for sheep, beef, arable, orchards or vineyards. This will mean 8,000 smaller low-risk farms will no longer require a plan in place.
Nearly $300,000 worth of fencing materials was given away this week to flood-hit farmers and growers in the Tasman district. The event, put on by the Rapid Relief Team, was a big help for farmers like Stuart Mitchell.
We've been through lambing, which has been a tough time, not a lot of fences. When you end up with like 2 stock-proof paddocks left on your property, it's not easy to manage things. It's nice to come out and just see what's happened around the rest of the place. I've hardly been off the property since it happened. We haven't had any financial or any other support, but a little bit of goodwill and a bit of fencing materials is going to go a long way.
A rare world-famous bull is up for sale. It's 5-year-old Arapuni Pride, a Rigget Galloway which was judged champion Galloway of the world. The owner of Cherrybank Stud in Pukeatua in South Waikato, Beth McVeary, says after nearly 20 years of breeding, the herd is also up for tender due to family illness.
We have the white Galloways, which are white, but they have the dark points on their ears and the dark feet and the dark noses, so they kind of end up looking like pandas. We have some that are red, which is quite rare in New Zealand, and so they have red points, which are really beautiful. And then the Rigget, which is one of the oldest colour patterns of the Galloway, but is only really making a resurgence now through breeders like myself that have specialised in them. They are solid in colour, and they have a white dorsal stripe down their back, and they can have roning on their faces and white under their keel. So they're quite distinct in their colour pattern.
Beth McVeary says the bulls cross well with dairy cows and produce premium quality meat calves. She's having an open day in September so people can cast their eye over the herd.
The skin from New Zealand Wapiti deer is gracing top-rung fashion stores in New York. It's being made into luxury handbags thanks to New Zealand designer Jessie Wong. Rhys Griffiths of Deer Industry New Zealand says what used to be a byproduct of venison is now taking off internationally.
Look, I reckon this is fantastic. We've got such premium products out there, when you think of the premium protein with New Zealand farm-raised venison, premium nutraceuticals with velvet, and now with Yome out there with their premium leather, or, as you said, Napa products, which is that kind of really high-quality, soft leather. So it's fantastic to see that on the world stage.
And that's a wrap of the rural news for the week.
You're listening to Country Life on RNZ National, 101 FM.
We're jumping across the ditch now, where a team of Aussie scientists have partnered with brewers on a project that not only cuts emissions from beer production, but also in raising livestock. They're growing algae, or algae as some people say, using the waste carbon dioxide made during the fermentation process, adding it to spent grain and feeding it to livestock with promising results. I spoke to the head of the project to learn more.
My name's Peter Ralph. I'm the Executive Director of the Climate Change Cluster at the University of Technology in Sydney.
Now, this has been a project underway for a number of years. Can you tell me a little bit about, I suppose, the starting point between trying to reduce emissions from the beer production process, growing algae, and kind of how we've gotten to this point of realising it could have another advantage for livestock?
The co-founders of Young Henry's saw an opportunity that they thought there was potential in integrating algae somehow into their process. And about the same time, we were interested in finding a local brewery that we could test some methods out. And I think we met down at the brewery and we started putting some ideas down on the table, and Young Henry's loved it. So it's been an exciting 7-year journey.
How does growing the algae help reduce the carbon which is made during the beer making process?
Algae absorbs CO2 and makes oxygen. Yeast absorbs oxygen and makes CO2. So beer manufacturing is a perfect yin and yang of CO2 and oxygen. So the process of making the beer, you need to ferment the yeast and therefore you make CO2. An organism like algae wants to take up that CO2. We don't put the oxygen from the algae back into the ferment, but essentially they're doing the converse of each other. So you need to be able to, if you're going to have a circular economy and if you're going to have a zero emissions production of your beer, you need to work out how to not release all of the CO2 that the fermentation does.
Right, so you've ordered your climate-friendly beer, but now you're also a little bit peckish, maybe craving a nice meaty burger. How can this project help ease some of your climate guilt when it comes to eating meat?
I keep coming back to circularity because it's a good story in circularity, but also emissions. So as in Australia and New Zealand, we know that our livestock are methane emitting. Both cattle and sheep emit methane, and through a natural process. And I think this is really important that, the process of growing livestock is a methane emitting function. And there's been a lot of research into how to reduce methanogenesis in the gut of cattle and sheep. There's one very successful algae compound called bromophor that's come from a seaweed called Asparagopsis, and this is around Australia. There's an awful lot of activity in this space. We're not working with a seaweed. We're working with microalgae. We started out as a bag reactor, an industrial type reactor on the brew floor that captures the CO2. So we had to work with microalgae, and we asked the question: does microalgae reduce methane in a similar or different way to seaweed? And over a PhD program and a few years, we've done a whole bunch of lamb trials, and we've understood the process by which if you feed microalgae to sheep, there's impact on the methane emission, but there's also impact on the health of the animal, the quality of the meats that come from it. So there's a wide range of benefits that feeding algae to livestock can generate. And that's what we've been looking at.
It seems like win-win-win all round. Now, when you add the brewer's spent grain, it becomes even more of a circular system.
So when you make beer, you take your barley and you ferment it for a while, but then there's leftover unfermented barley. And so that has to be then, it's gone through the fermentation process, it's been changed a bit, but there's still a lot of good protein and carbohydrates in that biomass. And that's one of the waste streams from brewing. And back during I'm not going to call it the millennial drought, but we had a really big drought back here in Australia. A lot of the cattle farms were basically, they had no feed, they had no grass, they had nothing available, and they were reliant on breweries sending out their spent grain, that's the waste product after you've brewed your barley, and cattle farms loved it. And so it's become this symbiosis where the cattle farms take the spent grain. We then just went, well, can we put our algae onto the spent grain, and that becomes a feed for the cattle. So we're taking two waste products, the CO2 and the brewer's spent grain, and providing that to the cattle. So it's really getting circular now.
Where are things at? How long could it be before, as I say, we're enjoying climate-friendly meat and climate-friendly beer possibly as a result of this project?
So the next step, so we've run our first lamb trials, and one of the important things, me as a plant biologist, a photosynthesis guy, I learned a lot during that first trial. When you do feeding trials, you have to use an awful lot of algae to even be a small percentage of the feed for lambs. And if we had gone to cattle trials, we would have needed an order of magnitude more algae to be made. So one of the challenges is growing enough algae to do these trials. I didn't realise how much lambs eat every day, and when you've got 40 of them for months, it takes a lot of algae to feed them as a small percentage of their total feed. So the next work that we're moving on, we've recently secured a federal government grant between Young Henrys and UTS to look at a high-throughput screen for methanogenic processes in cattle digestion. Because we've already screened, a few dozen algae, we want to understand before we go through to large-scale production whether there's other algae that are even better. So we've got a grant now for the next 2 years to develop a system so that we can screen hundreds and hundreds of algae. And in principle, we could screen other feeds to work out, do they generate the same amount of methane through the digestion process? So I think the next stage is to work out which will be the right alga to grow at scale, and then we'll move into large commercial scale. Most algae will grow well in a CO2-enriched environment, but it's working out which ones grow well in CO2-enriched environment and also have that benefit for the feed, reducing methane, helping the growth, making the growth rate faster of the lamb or the cow, and ensuring that we've got a healthy animal. That's what our next stage is.
That was Peter Ralph from the University of Technology in Sydney I was speaking to.
It seems that the ancient agricultural practice of scything is not a dead craft, despite the sharp-bladed tools association with the Grim Reaper. Beautifully crafted scythes are among gardening implements packed away in a rustic setting on the Coromandel Peninsula. That's where producer Sally Round is taking us to meet Beth Pearsall, who might be one of the most remote shopkeepers in the country.
This is a good steep hill to go up every day.
Yeah, keep me fit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I live here on this piece of land, and I grew up here actually, and I've been back about 8 years. and it's just a beautiful area in the northern Coromandel, close to the beach, lots of bush, lots of nice bush walks to go on, great community of people, lots of artists.
Beth Pearsall lives tucked away on a hillside covered in regenerating bush as part of an off-grid eco-village north of the little settlement of Colville.
And you spend time in Colville itself?
Yep.
What's your job there?
I work there on a restoration project, so replanting around rivers and wetlands and fencing. But I try and spend as much time as possible here.
And you have a side hustle?
I do have a side hustle.
And that's what we're going to go and find out about now.
Yeah.
Coming up off a little branch of the track, and we're coming to your place.
We're coming to my place, yeah. So I'm building this place myself with my own hands.
Wow, and there it is.
So it's an earth building, and the downstairs is going to be the new garden tool store because I've run out of room in the little spare room in my parents' house because it's grown. So I'm in the process of building a new space.
And that is the side hustle.
That is the side hustle. Yeah.
The garden tools are what you sell online from this beautiful spot in remote northern Coromandel.
Yeah.
They're pretty special tools as well.
We'll
talk about them in a sec. But
cool.
Do you want to show me around the house?
Sure. So, just watch your feet because there's ramps and it's very much a construction site here. So it's a light earth construction, so it's actually made of sawdust from the local mill and the clay just from the hill behind here. So I've tried to use really local materials. It's a beautiful space to live and work in, and I'm just working on the floor at the moment. That's the next step.
It's been a 5-year building project so far, in between her job and the garden tools business, selling handheld traditional implements used on small farms and gardens over hundreds of years. Skills in using them would have been passed down from generation to generation in the past, and may have been lost once power tools and mowers came along. So she's also upskilling a new generation.
Teaching people how to use them, how to maintain them, how to make them last forever. And so running workshops is kind of one of the things I've been doing. So we did a workshop on earth building, and so some people came and they designed this beautiful bottle sun in waves.
So the bottles are laid out in a circle on the wall, so you get the light shining through as if like rays of a sun.
Yeah. And
fantastic.
This is my wild abandoned garden because I've been so busy building. And I've got an orchard in the back there which you can barely see.
We'll come back to the garden later, but we need to find out more about these special tools, which all started with Beth's parents, Joanna and Bryan.
My great-grandmother's bell. Hello.
Hello.
Joanna and Bryan are some of the original inhabitants of the eco-village. Joanna arrived in 1980. There's evidence of their gardening prowess in the jars and jars of preserves on the shelves lining the walls, and freshly harvested fruit on the table. They sourced the tools from around the world.
We were teaching permaculture design. Part of that is about reducing consumption, especially carbon consumption. So rather than mowing, we decided we should import scythes and teach people scything. We did at least 2 tours of New Zealand with the scythes. People were really interested. Anyway, then we said, well, people want scythes, what else is there? And specifically we said, well, what else is there from Austria? And then we found the bronze tools that were inspired by a mix of Victor Schauberger and Rudolf Steiner. PKS is the name of the company, which means Pythagoras, Kepler and something else. I'm not sure what the S is.
So you started importing these tools?
Yeah.
And what's the basis for the tools that you select?
Well, they need to work well, they need to be well designed, and they need to last a long time. And a lot of indigenous tools are like that. So we got tools from Japan and from Korea and from Switzerland
And all based here in the middle of the bush.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we're not a remote area, we're the centre of the universe, and everything comes to us, so it's not a problem.
Even me, I've come to you. Yeah. Were you using these tools as well yourself?
Oh, yes, because we needed to know how they worked, and actually that's not necessarily obvious when you receive a tool that's a traditional tool in another country but is not used here at all. And it's quite amazing how really good it is to get a tool suited to a purpose.
That's Beth back in the orchard, sharpening the blade of a scythe, a handheld tool for mowing long grass and weeds, with a long curving blade you might have seen in old pictures of hay harvesting. These have been made by the same European company since the mid-1500s.
They still make them in the same place, and they're the last scythe blade producer in Austria. What I love about it is that it's a very meditative process, scything. I find it very relaxing, sort of like doing Tai Chi or something. And you can go out in the morning, and it works best when the grass is a bit damp. And so you can go out in the morning and it's quiet, you know, all you have is the swishing of the blade, and there's none of this kind of of a weed eater and that vibration. And so for people who are working a lot, you know, cutting a lot of grass between orchards or clearing space, if you can avoid having all of that vibration in your body and all that sound and all that burning of unnecessary fossil fuel.
Who's buying them?
I think it's a variation of people. So I would say probably mostly people living rurally, judging by the addresses that I send them to. So people, I think, with areas of land that they're wanting to, sometimes that they're wanting to clear of blackberry, brackens, things like that. I had people contact me after the cyclone because their lands in the East Cape, you know, had silt go all over them and all these weeds had sprung up and they needed a way to cut through it. And so a scythe was actually the perfect tool for that job. So I'd say, yeah, mostly people who've got a bit more space, because it's better when you've got a little bit more room because of the action of it. It's not so good if you've just got lots of little narrow spaces.
Beth's taken over the garden tool store from her parents and is building up a community of fellow traditional tool lovers through her workshops.
Now you are also teaching people to scythe. It's a skill, isn't it?
It is a skill. It is a skill, and I think it's, once you get the practice of it, it sort of feels really easy, but sometimes in the learning it can be a bit awkward or something while you're learning the movement, but once you get it, it's easy.
And that's all done online with video?
Yeah, maybe I'll go on a scything tour again one day, but at the moment I'm working, just getting it online so that people can see and the benefit of them and how to put them together and what the different options are and the different types of blades and the maintenance of them and the sharpening, and because that's one thing I'm really interested in is, one is the quality. You buy good quality things that will last forever, but you do have to maintain them, you know, like a car. If you don't change your tyres or change the oil, or, you know, it blows up or doesn't work anymore. And really good quality tools are like that.
Back in the office, Beth shows me some of the tools traditionally used in various Asian countries.
It looks a bit like a weapon, but this is a Korean sickle. And so this is like it's sort of a forestry tool, so they would use it for hedging, clearing tracks, harvesting rice. So it's a very sturdy, heavy steel blade with a really beautiful wooden handle. These are handmade.
And the blade it's almost perpendicular to the handle, isn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of like a hook. It's sort of like a sickle, but not as closed. Yeah, great for paspalum and kind of thicker grasses. I use it for track clearing in the bush. Probably my biggest seller is this one. It's called an oscillating hoe. So this bolts onto here. So that was another thing that we really wanted to support, is people being able to grow food at scale without industrial machinery. So this is a small version, but they get bigger, and even have one that goes on a wheel hoe, so you can wheel it along. So it's not only, it's still a hand tool, but it's not so much your arm action. And so the idea is that this cuts the weeds off under the surface of the soil, and it's got this rocking action so that it works backwards and forwards, and it's sharp on both sides. And this is my biggest seller. I sell a lot of these. Selling really high quality gardening tools that you never have to replace is not a great business model. I just want people to have quality, know how to use them, know how to look after them so that they can pass them on to their kids, And also, when you use a really nice tool, it makes the whole experience of gardening so much more pleasant. It just feels better. I'm excited to go and get my beautiful bronze trowel and do my transplanting. It's such a pleasure to use if something is beautiful and functional and lasts a long time and does the job really well.
Wow.
They're just really...
That is almost like gold, isn't it?
It is like gold, yeah.
It's a trowel with a beautiful gold glint to it.
Yeah. So it's bronze. Like the Bronze Age, they still find Bronze Age tools that defined a whole epoch of humanity because it lasts forever. These are really heirlooms,
As you might have guessed, they don't come cheap. But then, when you're scything, you won't have to pay for petrol to weed eat, and you'll get a workout as well.
So this is your other piece of equipment for the scything. So it's a whetstone.
And you carry that on your belt?
Yeah, you just have it just hooks on there. And it's basically for keeping the blade, so you... Just for keeping it really bright. So
how often do you have to do that as you're going?
You'll kind of feel when it stops cutting as cleanly. Yeah. So it depends on what you're cutting.
Beth, people associate scythe slightly with death, don't they? The Grim Reaper and all that.
They do, and I haven't investigated the mythology of that yet, but maybe it is something to do with, as death comes, it's the time to look back at your life and reap the harvest of your life and all of the things around you. And maybe there's some symbology in that.
Maybe a listener out there knows the answer and can let us know. Well, it's been lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for showing me around your patch of paradise here in the Coromandel.
Thanks so much for coming.
Beth Pearsall, scything back the weeds in her garden at the top of the Coromandel Peninsula. There's a video of her in action on our website. Go to rnz.co.nz/country. And that story was produced and presented by Sally Round.
Kia ora, you're with the McClatchy whānau, North Taranaki, Ngāti Mutunga, Ngāti Tama, and this is Rehu Toi Farm.
You're listening to Country Life
on RNZ National Radio.
Now we're heading to a rural hall near Leeston in Canterbury. This is where Trans-Tasman Dairy Symposium was held in late June. The event was organised by Quorum Sense, a farmer-led network managed by Chloe Deere. Cosmo Kentish Barnes is outside the bustling hall with Chloe and her colleague, Sue Cuberworth, who he chats to first.
Today, there's a group of 70 people inside the hall there who've all come together to talk about dairy farming, particularly the move to low input, more regenerative practices on dairy farms, both here in New Zealand and in Australia. We've got 20 Australians over here for a trip. And so it all started last year with a small gathering with a few people talking about the science in New Zealand and Australia around this low-input regen farming. And let's do it again next year. Well, yeah, it's really multiplied in numbers.
Yes. And for people who aren't familiar with regenerative agriculture, what does it mean? What does regen ag mean?
It's working as much as possible, enhancing the advantages that the biology and soil can bring to a farming system. And so we've always been really strong at the physical side of soil and the chemical side, and we've always known that there's a lot of biology happens down under the ground, but hey, how can we really allow that to express itself? And the result is that if we have lesser inputs and we allow our plants to really grow and thrive, particularly deep rooting, then that will help enhance a much stronger microbial environment in the soil. And so these farmers they're enjoying becoming less intensive and lower inputs, but still getting really, really good production and equivalent profitability.
And this farming system is becoming more common around the country.
There's certainly a lot of curiosity. A lot of farmers are very, very interested, and so people are dipping their toe in the water to various levels. And yes, you're correct. There's groups of farmers around the country who are helping each other, supporting each other, and it gives them confidence to actually try new things. And that's what I love about this is, I'm working with passionate, innovative people, and, as you know, what's not to love about that?
What's your background?
I grew up in Waikiki Valley, just south of Rotorua. Love spending time on my neighbours, my friends' farms. My parents weren't farming. And went to Massey, did an ag sci, applied to MAF to be a farm advisor, and was lucky enough to be offered 6 months training in Timaru. Well, 40 years later and I'm still in Canterbury.
And what are you doing here today? What's your role?
I'm supporting making this event happen. Chloe Dare, the manager of Quorum Sense, has sort of been the brainchild behind this, and I'm here helping and supporting and making sure it all runs smoothly. And yeah, just the best opportunity for people to get together, connect, learn, have a good time.
Now, Chloe, tell me about some of the speakers you have organised here today.
We wanted it to not just be the researchers, so whilst we have people, representatives from the Whenua Hamanu project that's being run by Massey University, a 7-year project, we also have a lot of individual farmers who are on their own also researching in the context of their own farms, but they're trying out all sorts of different things, and so they bring with them all of that knowledge that they've done from their own trials and experimentation. So we have farmers and representatives from Northland to Southland, and 8 farms represented, plus some researchers and representatives from catchment groups from Australia.
What's your background?
Well, I have a bit of a mixed background. I grew up in Southland and then ran away screaming, as one does. I studied agriculture and ecology in the 1980s when it wasn't the done thing to do. And that didn't lead to anything, so I went and got into street theatre. And then circus production and then event production. And I came back to New Zealand about 13 years ago. I went back into the primary industries and kind of rebuilt my career in what I was interested in. I come from a background that includes an organic farming grandfather, and I worked on organic farms as a young woman. And so I've always been interested in this field.
Yeah, so you've done the full circle.
I've done the full circle, and I'm a small-scale farmer with around about 180 sheep.
Where do you farm?
North Canterbury.
And what do you love about this work?
It's the connection with the farmers. It's a pretty unique group of people. Some of them have been trying out these practices or really developing their systems for 30, 40 years, and some of them are really early on in their journey, but it's the learning that I'm getting from everybody and also the connection. And they're all farmers trying to do well by the soil, well by their farms and their animals and the people that work on the farms. They're a very values-driven group of people.
Yes, and Chloe, Quorum Sense has got a big project in the pipeline.
Yes, we're going to be launching something called the Soil Hub. This is a directory of suppliers, advisors, educators from across New Zealand with services and supplies for the regenerative, organic, biological and low input farmers and growers. And the way the model works is that the suppliers and the people advertising on the directory will pay us to have their products and their services on board the Soil Hub. But at the same time, because the Soil Hub itself has low management costs, anything extra goes directly back into funding field days, podcasts, case studies, events like this one.
And where will people be able to find out about the Soil Hub?
Just Google Soil Hub New Zealand or soil-hub at quorumsense.org.nz.
Chris Hibbert is one of today's speakers. He's working on a sustainable farming program in Victoria.
So I've spent a career in the dairy industry. I'm also invested in the dairy industry myself, but as a dairy advisor I've supported the industry in a number of areas, including animal health and well-being, environmental sustainability, in financial management and human resource management.
And you're a vet?
By training, yes.
By training?
Yes.
Gosh, now tell me about this program you're involved with.
So at the moment, southwest Victoria, we are absolutely wanting to focus on an environmentally sustainable way of farming, and dairying is the main farm, but we do have beef and sheep in our area too. So our local land care group has a pilot program running this year that is looking at how dairy farmers in particular can consider biodiversity interventions on their farms that will make their farming better for the environment, for the animals, for the people and for the products that they produce.
Was it hard to find enough farmers to come on board?
Look, I think we've got a big enough dairy industry in our region that we were going to be able to find them. You know, I use the figures that probably 10% of farmers believe from their values that they would like to be able to uptake things like this, so they'll be willing early participants, and then the next row of them will probably want to see the science behind it before they do it, and then the next tranche will be the ones that need an incentive financially to do it. So we're in that top 10% of people that are really willing to come along and investigate.
Yes. Do they have to provide a lot of data for the program?
So it being a pilot, we're in a phase where they're learning about the sort of interventions that will improve sustainability and biodiversity. They are not compelled at this stage to actually take on any of those interventions. However, what they are doing is giving an opportunity for the industry at large to listen to the sorts of things that they believe would be achievable on their farm. So it's a two-way workshop. Really.
Yeah, so quite exciting for those farmers.
Yes.
And how is it going?
We've only been going for a month, so we've got our first workshop next week where we will invite the stakeholders as well as the program leaders and the pilot farmers along. So we are anticipating now that we will be able to launch into a larger program that will be available, and if we get the support of the milk processors and they can see where we're going and we're all unified in what we want to achieve, I think all of a sudden there'll be incentives for farmers to be involved.
And farmers do need some incentives because it's putting a lot more work on their plate.
Well, yes, I think as much as incentives, there's also the need for them to know that what they're taking on board is not going to unduly increase the risk in their business. So if they all of a sudden had to change, their total pasture base, for example, it would be too much and too risky. But if it is about saying, well, look, let's put 5% of our farm into revegetation and let's do it in a way that really looks after the welfare of the cattle and provides nature corridors and so on for wildlife and attracts bird life and that sort of thing, that's not too much risk. And also there's opportunities for them to perhaps be funded through organisations that need to put money into biodiversity themselves but they don't have land to do it, and projects that build a bit of scale. They'll say, look, if that sort of thing's happening on dairy farms, we'll put in some funds to support them.
Chris, how important is this farming program? What drives you to do this work?
Well, I dare say I'm one of the fortunate people that was a baby boomer who has had the best of everything. Didn't have to live through wars, didn't have to live through famines or anything. We've been in financially really sound times, and climate change is a concern for all of us. And I see now with my children and their children that they have a different world, and what can we do? And agriculture has such a big impact on our planet, and I'd love to see us doing that in a way that is more sustainable than what we have been.
At the back of the hall, Dean Parker's behind a camera to shoot a video about this symposium.
I'm a dairy farmer at Hororata. I'm also a filmmaker, and I've been involved with Quorum Sense for the last 4 years, and my position there has been the visual storyteller. So I've been lucky enough to go around all New Zealand and capture some of the most innovative farmer stories and make them into film.
Wow, what a cool job.
It's been a dream job, and fortunately I've been able to take all that knowledge back to my own farm and incorporate it into my own farm system.
Yes. Were you already practicing regenerative farming before you started shooting videos for Quorum Sense?
We'd just pretty much started that. We'd looked at ways of decreasing synthetic inputs. And my wife's a 5th generation dairy farmer, looking for ways to, leave the land and leave the farm in a better way for the next generation.
Tell me about the farm.
It's just a family-owned 200-hectare farm milking 360 cows, which is like half the herd average size in Canterbury, so it's pretty small, but yeah, we're fully irrigated.
What do you love about, farming in this way?
I was at a farm field day in Kaikoura last week, and while we were standing there in a group of people, New Zealand falcon flew overhead, and the farmer commented on how many more New Zealand falcons are roosting in his farm compared to his neighbours. And I've found through my experience with regenerative farming, most farmers will tell you that once you start cutting back on the synthetic inputs, the things that are actually degrading our land, the nature will come back, the bird life will come back.
Yeah, and in terms of productivity, are milk levels on par with where you were before?
Very interesting you say that. We've also incorporated a wintering system called hay bale grazing instead of cropping in winter, and through that system we've increased our per cow production from 405 kilograms of milk solids per cow to 456. So we've seen a significant jump in production by focusing more on nature-based solutions.
Yes. And what's it like being involved with Quorum Sense?
Well, it's an amazing network of farmers that are not selfish with their knowledge and prepared to share their knowledge and their experience. And Quorum Sense has done an amazing job of building on that network of community and just for the sake of sharing knowledge, really.
And it's quite fitting, as you mentioned earlier, that this symposium is being held in this hall near Leeston.
Yeah, so we're at the Lakeside Soldiers Memorial Hall, which is obviously a memorial to the Anzacs, and it's very fitting that we've got pretty much the first collaboration of Anzac farmers in this space of regenerative farming and just sharing different techniques from over the Tasman.
Earlier in the day, Australian dairy farmer Kate Mirams did a presentation with her husband, Peter Neves.
So this morning we were talking really about our journey across to regen, getting the confidence and then rolling it out across the farm. And this afternoon what we'll present is what that's done to the finances of our business over the 6 years. And we have been really on this journey of learning how to farm for thriving biodiversity and abundance. And when I say that, we want abundant, thriving soil microorganisms, abundant, diverse, thriving plant communities, animal communities, insect communities, life, and also our own family and our own community.
Tell me about your farm.
So we farm on the magnificent floodplain of the McAllister River, just downstream from Lake Maggie, and we've got flood irrigation and spray irrigation, a very reliable irrigation district, deep, rich alluvial soils, and pretty good climate for dairy farming. We milk 330 cows this year, all spring calving, and we have a small runoff block for young stock that's just 10 k's away.
How good is it to be here to share your insights at this dairy symposium?
It's an absolute honour to be invited to share our journey. We've hosted a small trial on our farm comparing conventional practices to, inverted commas, regen practices. And on the regen area, the practices have gradually changed as we've learnt what to do, and the results have been absolutely startling. We've doubled the water held in the soil on the regen compared to the conventional bays. We've got roots down at least 60 centimetres on the regen compared to only 30 on the conventional bays. We've got only 9 degrees of diurnal temperature variation in the heat of summer on the regen compared to 16 degrees on the conventional bays. And in this current financial year just finished, we averaged 5 tonnes of pasture harvested per hectare more on the regen than on the conventional bays.
That's a lot more.
Yeah, and we've been in the Australian Dairy Farm Monitor program for 20 years, so we've got masses of financial data showing what it's done across our whole farm in that time. And so we've steadily increased our cows milked. We steadily increased our milk solids. We've steadily increased our return on assets over the journey of the 5 years since we've really been doing the regen practices intensively on our farm, and we've steadily reduced our nitrogen use down to from about nearly 200 kilos per hectare down to just 20. So while we're not really trying to don't use nitrogen or don't use synthetic fertiliser or we're just really trying to farm to create thriving life across the farm, more so than cutting out this or don't do that.
What do your farming neighbours think about this journey you're on?
I love that question. And sometimes you think that it matters, and I've really taken the attitude that if I'm to be a good ancestor, if the legacy that my life experience leaves is of any value, I have to not really worry about that too much. But I did have an amazing experience recently. One of our neighbours also does a bit of agricultural contracting, and he was sowing some multi-species seed for us. And as we're pouring the bags in and I'm squirting the vermicast onto the seed, he said, "This is the most exciting thing that's been in my seed drill." And that was quite profound to me. And then the next thing he said is, Mum and Dad have started looking at different foliar mineral applications. They're pretty happy with the results, actually. And so I think that our job is to just stay really focused on doing the best that we can manage ourselves and being really honest about what's good and what's not and what fills us with joy and what is the struggle. And people will take it or leave it when they're ready, and that's okay.
I managed to grab one more interview just before the next session got underway.
I'm Willie White, so I'm an organic dairy farmer from Central Hawke's Bay, so I just flew down this morning. I'm also sit on the board of Quorum Sense, who organised the day, and they've asked me to say a few words this afternoon, actually.
What will you be talking about?
I'm sort of focusing on the finance side of it. Yeah, just to talk a bit about some of the economics around regen, because obviously that's probably the most important thing really when it comes down to it. And that's probably what got me into it, and I've always sort of thought that, if you get the economics right, then, the environment and the philosophy, it all actually falls into place and looks after itself, yeah.
So were you a rural banker before you became a farmer?
Yeah, so grew up on a farm, and then I was down here at Lincoln for a few years, and then had a stint rural banking for 7 or 8 years in the Waikato, and then down in the Tararua, and then eventually just went home to the family farm. And so we've sort of got 1,000 cows across a couple of dairy platforms, and previously sort of up till 2019-20 it was sort of run conventionally with 1,400 cows, so we've completely changed the system and gone certified organic and adopted regenerative principles, and we feel like it's been a good move, yeah.
Was dropping cow numbers essential?
I think it was for us. It allowed us to be self-contained and have some control over the cost side of the business, and even though of course we dropped production with a drop in cow numbers that significant, the overall economics work out better for us, yeah.
Can you get a premium for your milk?
Yep. So we're supplying Fonterra and the organic program, and this year the forecast is $12.30 for this season versus the $10 conventional one. Yeah.
And what were the biggest hurdles you faced during the conventional to organic conversion?
Obviously there's a big challenge around, it's a mindset change, it's a paradigm shift. But I think once you're convinced that it's the right thing to do, then all of that falls into place. But I don't know, it's just a big learning curve, and I guess you've got to be in the right space to be on that journey.
A lot of trial and error?
Yeah, heaps of trial and error and mistakes, and I don't think you can really grow and get better without making them. And obviously trying to pull a whole team of people along with you, there's always challenges around that. And we were pretty fortunate that it all worked pretty good from the get-go anyway, so...
And what's it like being here today and seeing farmers from all around Aotearoa and also from Australia?
Yeah, it's actually really good to catch up with a few of these Aussie guys, and you can see actually that they're trying to do the same things as us. And it's always good to catch up with the South Island crew, a lot of people you actually communicate a lot with but you don't actually see very often, so it's always nice to catch up in person.
Willie White ending that story from Dairy's Regenerative Transition Symposium, organised by Coromandel and held in Leeston. Cosmo was also talking to Chloe Deere, Sue Cuberworth, Dean Parker, and from Australia, Chris Hibbett and Kate Mirims. And that's this week's Country Life. Thanks for joining us. You can also find photos and more information about the stories in this episode in our show notes. We love getting your feedback and ideas for future stories. You can reach us country@rnz.co.nz.
And we'd hate for you to miss an episode of Country Life. To get every episode free to your phone, click follow on your app now. And if you enjoyed our show, give us a shout on social media or tell a friend by clicking the share button in this app.
Out in the field today were myself, Sally Round and Cosmo Kentish Barnes.
The show was produced and engineered by David Knowles and Phil Bench. Ka kite.
Catch you next time.